Well, at this time, I'd like to call the Group 2 Remissions meeting, it's the Group 2 Remissions meeting to order, and I'm going to first allow our council to give us the proper notices so that we can begin our review. Oh, yes. According to Executive Order 1, it mandates the chair inquires to whether anyone knows of any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to the matters before this group. And if any member knows of a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict, please state so at this time. It appears that we have none, and I'm going to turn it over to Council Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. For those of you who were in the Water Quality Committee meeting yesterday, you heard me give the same instructions, and you hear me give them very frequently when these matters come before you all. But the remissions requests coming before you, there are 2 of them, but any time a remissions request, in any number I suppose, comes in front of you, you're acting in your quasi-judicial capacity as opposed to your quasi-legislative capacity. And the example I always give about quasi-legislative is rulemaking and policy decisions. Quasi-judicial decisions require members to not only avoid a conflict of interest, which none were identified today, Madam Vice Chair, but also to avoid legally impermissible bias as well. Each of these matters are required to be decided fully and fairly after full deliberation and only based on the record. So you can't consider anything outside of the records, and you must set aside all prior knowledge of the proceedings. As you are all aware, there are various factors that you have to consider as part of your authority in reviewing remissions requests, but there are no factual disputes at issue, as the person or entity against whom the penalty was assessed must include a stipulation of the facts underlying the assessments, as well as a waiver of the right to contest the penalty. So in other words, the question in front of you is not whether a violation occurred, but whether there are grounds to reduce the penalty. Madam Chair, I believe, I understand that someone is on the way to handle the UST matter, but there's also a DAQ matter in front of you, both of these without oral presentation. Start with that.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, we can start with the DAQ item, which is civil penalty 2303, request for remission of civil penalty by Ronald W. Snyder, doing business as Ron Snyder Construction, DAQ 2022-019. And I'm not sure who our presenter is, but if you would come forward.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Steve Hall. I'm the Technical Services Section Chief for the Division of Air Quality. Enforcement is under my section. So this case against Ronald W. Snyder, doing business as Ron Snyder Construction, it involves 2 open burning incidences. The first, we received a call on December 29th, and that both of these came to us from the Watauga County Fire Marshal. And so there was open burning on December 29th, documented by the Watauga County Fire Marshal on the property of Mr. Ronald Snyder. The fire marshal had a previous incident with Mr. Snyder. He had seen the same material from a demolished shed on another site and told Mr. Snyder not to burn it, and then ended up responding to a fire at Mr. Snyder's property where the same material had apparently been moved and burned on that property. So once DAQ received the forwarded complaint from the fire marshal, we did our own investigation and sent an NOV, notice of violation, notice of recommendation for enforcement letter to Mr. Snyder and his company dated January 3rd, 2022. And then that letter was sent certified mail and signed for. So it was received, but no response came to us from Mr. Snyder. Then on February 17th, we received an additional complaint. This was regarding a fire that the Cove Creek Fire Department investigated on the night of February 16th, 2022, and it was at a different location in Watauga County, 164 Henson Holler Road. And through their investigation, the fire department determined that Mr. Snyder was responsible for this burn as well, mainly due to his equipment being on or near the site there. And Mr. Snyder has admitted to burning vegetated debris at or near that location on that date. However, the pictures and evidence provided by the fire marshal show that there was synthetic material, including a mattress, the remains of a mattress and other metal materials in the fire. So we followed up with another notice of violation, notice of recommendation for enforcement on February 22nd, issued again to Ronald W. Snyder, doing business as Ron Snyder Construction. And that was received by Mr. Snyder via certified mail, but we did not receive a response. On May 31st, 2022, DAQ Director Mike Abrazinskis issued a civil penalty assessment in the amount of $4,500 plus $290 in investigative costs, and for both of these incidences combined. And the certified letter was delivered to Mr. Snyder on June 3rd, 2022. We did receive a request for remission from Mr. Snyder. He didn't check any of the boxes indicating the reason for remission. He did put in a handwritten note, just requesting, forgiveness for the incidences. He provided a handwritten response also, but really didn't change the facts of the case in any way. So on August 31st, 2022, Mike Abrazinskis, DAQ Director, reviewed the information in Mr. Snyder's remission request and found no grounds to modify the assessment. So it is now before you today, and Mr. Snyder did not request an oral presentation before the EMC, and DAQ does not recommend remission in this case.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Prior to these two incidents, were there any occurrences of violation by Mr. Snyder?
Not with DAQ, but according to the Watauga County Fire Marshal, they had several encounters with Mr. Snyder prior to that related to oak burning.
Thank you.
And you encounters meaning they had a fire that was out of control or something that...
Just talking to them about what can and can't be burned. And I think what happens a lot, and I don't know this specific case, fire marshals will try to handle open burning issues themselves and not refer them to us. But when they start getting somebody who's not getting the message, that's when they refer them to us. So I think they have probably responded to a few cases, put the fire out, told them, look, you can't do this. And then once it kept happening, they've referred it to us.
And I see reference in here to what's must clearly been a bike spring out of a mattress that was burned, at least in one. Was there evidence that there were synthetic materials in both?
Oh,
or only one?
the first, well, get into the definition of synthetic materials here, but there was, it was the remains of a shed in the first incident, and it's a lot of material that was burned there, but you're talking about, they mentioned treated lumber in the report and other remains that, the fire marshal in their report said there was no attempt to remove the synthetic material from the burn pile prior to its burn. So,
yeah, but so they saw evidence of actual synthetic material. Now you mentioned treated lumber. Is treated lumber prohibited?
Any type of man-made, officially by our rules, any type of man-made material would be considered synthetic. But treated lumber, yes, because we don't know how it was treated. What chemicals were used to treat it.
When you say man-made, I mean you're not talking about lumber, though. Just regular wood.
It could be considered. Dimensional lumber could be. We generally, if it's clean dimensional lumber, that's not something that raises our alarm. But if we're unsure, if it's already been used, say in a building or something like that, then we don't know what type of chemicals it's been exposed to, or things been spilled on it, or whatever. So once it's been put in use in a shed or a building of any way, that's considered synthetic if they burn that. Yes.
Okay, I guess I was under this apprehension. I thought wood generally, and woody debris, yard waste, and all that was considered acceptable for burning.
Not treated, not after
treated,
it's been
I
used,
understand what you're saying about treated.
not after it's been put to use in any way. So now we do, in our assessment factors, consider whether it's just wood debris versus whether it's synthetic materials, other types of synthetic materials.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Any other comments or questions?
I do have one question. It's a formality, and I won't even bring it up, but I just want to make sure. From a process standpoint, is it sufficient to just identify the February 16th one without a written statement from the property owner, that the property owner wasn't burning it? It's just a procedural question of, and I'm not trying to question y'all's decision or the director's decision, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is difficult to, to nail down exactly, whose property the burning occurs on, and then, what we're really concerned about is who started the fire, regardless of what property it is. And in this case, the evidence that the fire department that responded found was Mr. Snyder's equipment nearby, and then a conversation with Mr. Snyder by our staff later on saying where he admitted to burning on or near that property, but he said it, and he actually provided a burn permit for that time too, that said he'd only be burning sticks or branches, but he claims he was only burning vegetative debris, yet there was synthetic material in there. And just to kind of, that part of the assessment, we treat it as a minor, a very small amount of synthetic materials burned. And that was the smaller part of the two-part assessment.
Okay.
So.
And I just wanted for clarification, I was reading, your actual assessment was 9% of the allowable or permissible amount.
Correct.
Authorized through the statute or through the regulation.
Which would be $25,000 per incident. So $50,000 would be the maximum we could do for these 2 days, 2 incidences. So.
Thank you. Ms. Weese, if you'd like to make your...
Thank you. I move to uphold the penalty as assessed. I don't see any grounds to reduce the penalty, and I just cast back to Mr. Abrazinska's explanation earlier today about the burn here in Raleigh, and I think he did a good job of differentiating for us that what might be a a permitted burn for highway use or some other function is quite different than allowable under the air quality rules, and I sense that often gets lost when we are presented with these cases. But I think here, Mr. Snyder avoided the cost of proper disposal. He carried materials to a site after being advised not to burn them. And on the second burn, he alleges only vegetation, but the pictures clearly do show, I believe, a box springs and some other things in there. So I propose that, or I move that we uphold the penalty.
Commissioner Weiss has moved. Second.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that the remission not be, or that the penalty be upheld, excuse me. And at this time, we'd like to have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second item for consideration, do we have our presenter here?
We did.
Is civil penalty 2302, a request for remission of civil penalty by JIDT LLC, UST number 21-104P. And Ms. Strauss, I believe, is presenting. We're ready whenever you are.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
Yes, this matter involves JIDT LLC, and on June 29th, 2021, the UST program conducted a compliance inspection at the facility named Lake Martin. This inspection revealed that leak detection monitoring results were missing for February 2021 through May of 2021 for one of the tanks. And on June 3rd, 2021, petroleum was placed into an unpermitted UST system. On June 29th, 2021, UST issued a notice of violation. We received return receipt that indicated delivery of the NOV on July 2nd. On July 3rd, 2021, UST issued a notice of recommendation for enforcement action. And on August 3rd, we received electronic return receipt that indicated delivery of the notice of recommendation for enforcement action. On January 31st, 2022, JIDT LLC was assessed a civil penalty in the amount of $5,545.56. And on February the 3rd, we received electronic return receipt indicating delivery of the civil penalty. On February the 7th, 2022, JIDT LLC requested remission of the civil penalty. On February 14th, 2022, UST received the request for remission from JIDT LLC. The request included a waiver of a right to an administrative hearing and stipulation of facts and a justification for remission request. The JIDT LLC in its remission request had indicated that that payment of the penalty would prevent them from completing necessary remediation. So UST on February the 22nd, 2022, sent a letter requesting financial data in support of JIDT LLC's request for remission. On February the 25th, 2022, we received electronic return receipt that indicated delivery of the request for financial data. On May 16th, 2022, the Director of DWM UST considered the information contained in the remission request and found no grounds to reduce the penalty assessment. And on May 18th, 2022, we received return receipt that indicated delivery of the remission decision. JIDT LLC did not request an oral presentation before the Environmental Management Commission, and they were assessed a civil penalty for previous violations in 2019. Additionally, I should let you be aware that all violations were resolved, and JIDT currently has a valid permit. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So they had you've got two different situations. You've got a lack of records. I assume that was for permitted UST or USTs, plural, whichever it was, but they had a separate UST system that was not permitted?
No, they, the tank owner operator had failed to submit a permit application when their permit expired, so they were operating without a permit. And during that not only were they operating without a permit and receiving fuel drops, they also were not doing leak detection monitoring. So there's multiple.
It's the same system though, it's
requirements.
not two different systems, that's why I was a little
Correct.
confused. Okay. And it's a little bit hard to read it, but there's a scribbled note at the bottom of one of these pages, I don't remember which one now, that seems to say that they were justifying the lack of records on the fact that the facility was closed for those couple of months. Is that correct?
Oh, on their remission request?
Well, I'm not sure if it was a request, but there's a scribbled, handwritten note at the bottom of, let's see if I can find it. And I'm having trouble, oh, here it is, this is page 28. I think that's what it says, this was closed, that period of violation. They never let us know.
Well, he's saying it was leased, that the store was leased that period of violation. They never
Oh, I'm
let-
sorry, leased, all right, thank you. All
Yeah,
right.
never let us know, or any letter to us for any violation.
At least since we've been, okay, all right. So he's arguing that he was not responsible because someone else actually held the lease and was operating the facility?
Correct.
So my question would be, because I'm looking at the violations, did the violations go to the named JIDT LLC, or did they go to the lessor? Just for the record, when the violations were issued.
They were issued to the owner of the tanks. And that
Okay.
is, tank owners and operators are held jointly and severally liable. And our policy is to notice the tank owner, and if there's a compelling reason, to also notice the tank operator.
Yeah, and that was just for clarification, because I don't see anything going in this evidence here going to anyone other than the person that's named or the entity that's named in this action. So their excuse of not receiving notice from the lessor does not seem to apply if the information was going directly to them as well.
That's right.
Correct.
So the lessor did not receive an NOV or any penalty assessment?
No. Right, the lessee is not the tank owner, and tank owners and operators are jointly and severally liable.
Well,
Without getting too much into that, just for the moment, I was interested, did I understand you to say that they are now in compliance with a valid permit?
Yes.
But no information was ever submitted under that, other than the, as far as their financial hardship. They never submitted any proof, even to you, of their inability to both correct the problem and be in compliance.
They did, and I believe that, I thought it was sent to you all. I see they sent 2 years of tax returns, because I see the social security number redacted. I thought it was sent to you, but.
I saw where you requested it, but then the
Yeah.
follow-up in the file said that there was no proof submitted after the request. But that makes really no difference to my decision about this remission, about this penalty.
I did it, if you're finished.
Yeah, whether I misunderstood that or not, I'm prepared
If I
to
may,
go forward. Thank you.
When I assessed this penalty, they had already resolved the violations, but the penalty was assessed because leak detection monitoring is a serious, lack of monitoring their tanks is a serious violation, and also so is receiving fuel without a valid operating permit. And this party, JIDT, had been assessed a penalty for the same violation, not the permit one, but the leak detection monitoring one in 2019. So they were assessed a penalty even in spite of being in compliance at the time I assessed the penalty.
Thank you very much.
But
Thank you.
the lessee, though, is the operator, correct?
Correct.
But you're saying, and I assume then that that would have been, who would have been in charge or responsible for that receipt of fuel in an unpermitted tank, correct? And not the owner.
Well, under our regulatory scheme and rules and laws, both parties are equally responsible. And we don't differentiate who's more responsible. They're both.
Well, no, I'm not asking for that, but I guess I'm still sort of struggling with the why the lessee didn't receive an NOV a year and some part of this penalty. And why it all went to the owner if the lessee was at least responsible for the owner probably, I don't know, may or may not have been responsible for not having the permit. But it seems like the lessee is the one that should have been responsible for both the receipt of the fuel and the monitoring records. Am I wrong about that?
But we don't differentiate. Their lease, they have a lease agreement.
Right.
And that's between them. But when we show up on a site, they need to be showing us the leak detection records.
Right, no, I
We don't care if
understand.
it comes from the owner or the operator. And the owner, typically, practically speaking, the owners own the tank and they
Yeah.
register with us, and when there's an ownership change, they're required to notify us. Not so the operator. So we don't, from a practical standpoint, we don't always know who's operating or when that operatorship changes. So our policy is to notice the tank owner.
But not the operator.
No.
To Mr. Carter, I mean, given what this particular case did in the finding of fact, I mean, to me, $5,500 is something we should uphold. I mean, I don't think you're trying to go to, we need to split something with two parties here, because this person in this case had the responsibility to do it right, and they clearly did it wrong.
Well, certainly for the permit, but for the operation, if someone else has leased a property from you and is operating it, you don't have any control over what goes on that property at that point, if you're the owner.
Yeah, you do.
Maybe the permit, but not the operation.
You have the responsibility if that's being done under your watch, yes.
Well, I'm not clear what you mean by on your watch. but
Well, you're the registered agent for the whole
You're the registered owner, but the operator is the one who's accepting the fuel and is also the one that's supposed to be doing the leak detection. I believe. I don't.
So is your point to remit, are you gonna remit some of this because of that?
No, I think we ought to be hitting both of them, and at least.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to get this motion made, and y'all talk about that offline. I mean, I'm talking about this guy.
Well, I'm just still trying to understand why the operator is not equally responsible, at least in this situation, whether it's a separate, wholly separate penalty, or whether it's split or whatever. I'm just real unclear why the operator isn't, frankly, more involved in my mind in this whole thing.
Well, I'm ready to make a motion to get this guy, and then y'all can talk about that later, but, I mean, I think we need to uphold this one. I'm ready to make that motion.
If there are no other comments,
I make the motion that we uphold the civil penalty as implemented by the staff. By the department.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. We uphold the penalty. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm just not voting.
All right, one abstention. Thank you so much. That ends our civil penalties for review. I want to thank everybody for your service, and I was supposed to say this at the beginning. Lois said there were still snacks. Do we still have snacks, Lois? Yes. Okay, there's still snacks available in the room. She would like our assistance in taking as many as possible so she does not have to clean them up. So thank you, everyone, and have a good afternoon.
Hey, just for y'all, I would like to show up.
So they cause us more opportunity
Maybe listen to them.
I think that's a good description.
You show up because